Today, I'm finally back with another car modeling series, and the main character is going to be the Mclaren Senna GTR. In this video, I'll start by making the hood of the car, and in the next one, I'm going to model the middle of the body. Obviously, don't worry if you are a beginner. I'll try to explain myself as best as I can. The only thing you need is just a basic understanding on how to move, scale, and rotate things in Blender. This said, make sure to leave a like and follow the channel to not miss the next episodes. And without further ado, let's get started. Open a new Blender scene and delete the default cube. Then import the blueprint reference, which as always you can find on my Patreon channel completely for free. Once you did that, rotate it to align it with top view and adjust it at the center of the scene, making sure that your blueprint is as centered as possible. To make this operation way easier, click on this icon while selecting your image, tick this checkbox and set the opacity to a value of 0.5, so that now the grid appears under the blueprint and you can use these little rectangles to position it better. After you positioned one portion of the blueprint correctly, duplicate it with Shift+D and repeat this process with all the other ones, obviously paying attention to the proportions using the methods I just showed you. Once you're satisfied with your references, position them like this, and then you're ready to start modeling. During the entire process, I'm also going to use some additional references I personally got from Mclaren's official website, but you can find them together with the blueprint on my Patreon channel. I'm also going to use a software called PureRef to display them on my screen. You can find the download link in the description. Finally, add a lattice and set its resolution to something like 11 on all dimensions. This is done so that we get this nice grid that we can use to properly space our vertices. Scale it and position it to fit the hood of the car. We're going to start by making the inner part of the bonnet, then we're going to make the sides and finally the air intake in the middle. Start by adding a cube, then enter Edit Mode, select all, and delete by pressing Collapse Edges and Faces. Now you'll have only one vertex remaining, which you're going to position at the outer border of the hood. Once you did that, use E to extrude it and carefully start outlining the borders of this portion of the hood. Normally, we should position these vertices on the borders of the grid we just made with our lattice. But in this case, you can notice that the shape of our car requires something different. Anyway, the only purpose of creating this grid is to get the vertices as evenly spaced as possible. So keep that in mind and don't pay too much attention to it, as long as your vertices are spaced correctly. Once you outline one part, repeat the same process on the other side. But this time, make sure that you have the same number of vertices on both sides of the hood in order to achieve a clean quad-based topology in the end. Now that we have a complete outline of the inner part of the hood, we can start to fill it with some faces. Start by creating a face here. Then add a vertex on this side here, so that we create an edge loop that passes in the middle of the model. Now connect these two vertices, add another one in the middle and select this section here with Ctrl plus Shift. Then simply press Ctrl plus F, then grid fill. Sometimes Blender is going to get it right at the first time, but in this case, we'll have to adjust the offset manually. Now repeat this operation on the other section, but first make sure that you have the same number of edges on opposite sides. For example, here I had to dissolve a vertex. To make our topology a little bit cleaner, we're going to use the Space and Relax loop tools that are going to be very useful during the entirety of this series. For this reason, I assigned to them Shift plus Space Bar and Shift plus R as shortcuts, and I suggest you to do the same. Once you're satisfied with how your model looks, press Ctrl+2 in object mode to add a subdivision modifier. Now add some loop cuts so that our topology looks smoother. Also make sure to use space and relax loop tools to make everything a little more tidy. Now go into the Modifiers tab and add a mirror modifier on the Y-axis so that we now have a symmetrical model on both sides, to which we can start to give some tridimensionality. Obviously, make sure to position it at the top of the modifiers hierarchy. We won't need this grid anymore, so you can hide it or delete it. The only thing we have to do now is to raise our model up and to start positioning every vertex in the right position following our blueprint. I suggest you to start from the front of the car and to pay particular attention to this part of the process, as it is the one that could make or break your car's looks. While modeling, some parts won't be visible on the blueprint, so the only way to handle this is to watch your additional references and to try to figure out how your model should be. Here, I noticed that the front part of my blueprint is probably not aligned correctly with the rest. If something like this happens to you, don't worry. Just try to adjust this in the best way possible and it'll be fine. After finishing the front part of the car, I suggest you to repeat the same process with the back. I noticed that the outer part of our model, it's a little bit higher than it should be, so I simply fixed the issue. After that, I passed on adjusting this edge loop in between, using primarily the Relax Loop tool, which is very helpful in this types of situations. Also, I added a new loop cut to improve the quality of my topology and to drive the curves more easily. Once I finished that, I adjusted this curve parts here. Then I added a loop cut here to make this angle more tight. And after some time, here's how my model looks. Now let's make the sides of our hood. Start by extruding this side of what we have done. Then with your vertices, cover about a half of the fender. And after doing that, use Alt+E to extrude all of these faces along their normals in order to create that height difference you can see from the references. But to sharpen those angles, we're going to need a bevel modifier. Go into the Modifiers tab and put it in between the mirror and the subdivision modifier. Then set the amount to 0.01 meters, the segments to 2, the limit method to weight, and the shape to 1. Then to add a bevel, select the edges you want to sharpen, then press N and set the mean bevel weight to 1 here in the top right corner. After applying the bevels, I adjusted this part here, which is a little bit lower, and returned on modeling the rest of the hood, using the methods I showed you earlier. As you can see, I started from this part here and went on using extrusion to outline this part of the car. And then I concentrated on this part here, modeling the outer part of the rim and using loop tools to smooth every part of the model. Also here, I added a loop cut and continued rounding the shape. Then here I extruded this vertices down and placed them as you see on video. Then I added a loop cut here, spent some time smoothing the entire shape, and here's how our model looks right now. After that, I extruded these vertices down to complete this part. And then I adjusted this part here. So that now our car looks way better. And now let's focus on making the curve for the front part of the car. I started by simply trying to outline its shape from side view. But then I realized I was doing things wrong and had to start over. Basically, these vertices had to be a little bit lower. I also had to redo this part here. But in the end, it turned out great. And now let's finally focus on making this big air intake in the center of the hood. I started by duplicating the inner border of what we just made, then separated this to a new object with P, then by selection. Once I did that, I extruded this curve here and adjusted it following the blueprint. As you see from your reference, this part here should be separated from the rest. So select the vertex and press V to do so. After that, raise this up a little bit to match the blueprint. Then add a loop cut in the middle and lower it to create this smooth upside curve. Now we have to create the hole where the air flows. To do that, I firstly extruded one vertex along the border of the vent, then I duplicated this curve here and adjusted it following the images I had. And then when I was satisfied, I connected these vertices, created a face right here, then I selected this border and pressed F multiple times to fill this up. Here I applied a bevel and modified the amount parameter to 0.001 in the modifiers tab. Finally, let's make our air intake here. Firstly, I tidied up the topology a bit, then I insetted these two faces by pressing I and checked boundaries by pressing B. Then I simply extruded them in, deleted the back faces, and our hole was done. For now, I only applied some bevels to the borders, but we're going to modify this later. Now let's fill the surface. To do this, I firstly duplicated this curve here and adjusted it to fit the rest of the shape. After that, I connected these vertices right here so that we can fill one section at a time. Let's start from this one. To make this process faster, you can go here in this section in the top right corner and tick the checkbox which says Statistics. Now, in the top left corner, there's going to appear some data about how many vertices you're currently selecting, for example, and this is super useful. You can see from the video that I deleted 2 vertices from here to make them 4. And added 1 vertex here to make them 7 on this side. So that I have the same number of edges on opposite sides, which allows me to fill everything. I decided to remake this hole, as it wasn't similar enough to the original as I wanted to. Basically, what I did was shrinking this border here. Then I made this side a little more curved and extruded it again. And applied bevels to all the corners except for the top right one. Finally, we can concentrate on filling the other section of this hole. What I did was simply aligning this vertices with my blueprint. Then I deleted 1 vertex and connected this with the other side to fill everything. Obviously, during this operation, make sure to maintain the same number of edges on opposite sides. Otherwise, you won't be able to fill this up. I quickly used the Relax Loop tool to improve my topology. Then I concentrated on this part here because, as you see here, there should be some vertices that separate this little triangle from the model. After adjusting everything, I quickly modeled the center part of the air intake by extruding this face here, adjusting the vertices following the blueprint. And then we can start to model the final part of the air intake, which is the one in the center of it. I started by simply extruding a bunch of vertices in the center of the model. Then I raised them up to match the reference. And connected these vertices together. Immediately after that, I started outlining the rest of the shape. And after doing that, I made a face here, adjusted these 2 edge loops so that they can be connected, and started filling everything. If your faces start to look like this, select everything and press Shift+N to recalculate the normals, and it should be fixed. Here I figured out that we don't need these edges, so delete them and close this gap to make it look better. Now that we don't have this in our way, we can simply finish closing this faces here. Then you can add a loop cut here to merge these vertices and extend this pipeline. Obviously, don't forget to apply bevels. There are only 4 things we have to do now to complete our hood. We need to raise these faces up by a little bit using Alt+S to make them look better. Then to apply some bevels on their corners. Also, we need to add a solidify modifier to this object in order to give it some. Make sure to position it between the bevel and the subdivision modifier. Then use a value of 0.005 meters for the thickness and -0.8 for the offset. Now finally add a loop cut here, slide it up to sharpen those corners, and here's the hood of our Mclaren Senna GTR. I hope you liked the content of this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to not miss the next episode, in which we're going to model the middle part of the car. This said, let me know if you like what I'm making by leaving a comment below this video. And, as always, see you in the next one.